industry itself. Yeah. Don't give a goddamn what nobody say. They tell you something different, they lying.
Or to really be associated with that. Right. That ain't in my best interest. Right. Well, if that's the take on it, I have no choice but to separate myself, just due to what's best for me and mine.
The name Alpha Omega used to echo through the streets like a warning bell. Standing tall at 6'4", built like a linebacker, and marked with the kind of scars only life can give, he carried himself like a warrior. He wasn't just some rapper trying to make noise. He was the energy, the hype, and the backbone behind one of hip-hop's biggest names, T.I. And just when it looked like he was about to carve out his own spot in the rap game, everything flipped upside down. Out of nowhere, he got kicked out of the crew. Papers popped up, rumors started flying, and suddenly people were calling him a snitch. In a blink, all that momentum he'd built vanished. His career hit the brakes hard, and the rise he dreamed of was gone before he could even catch his breath. Now let's rewind. Cedric Zellers wasn't just another name out of Atlanta. He came straight from Techwood Homes, a place with history running deep in its walls. Built back in the 1930s, Techwood was America's first public housing project. But by the time Cedric was born on June 2nd, 1972, that old legacy had twisted into something darker. What used to be historic had turned harsh. Techwood was a battlefield of its own. Cedric once called it a predator and prey zone, a city inside a city where survival wasn't guaranteed.
Snitch on nobody. I ain't no snitch. I don't work for the DEA and none of that. They use my loyalty against me. And that's how I feel is happening right here. With this thing with me and Tip, you know what I'm saying? One time I got locked up when I called the Fed gun charge. I didn't come back home in 2002. I did 7 years, 4 days, 5 hours, 32 minutes, and 16 seconds, dog.
The streets were washed over by the Red Dogs, a police unit that rolled through like they owned the block. Violence wasn't a story told to him. It was something he saw before he even knew what it meant. When Cedric was just 3 years old, he witnessed his father hurt his mother so badly she lost her teeth, a moment that left a mark deeper than any scar. That kind of pain doesn't fade. It shapes you for life. By the time Cedric Zellers hit 9 years old, he was already dancing on the edge of the system. It didn't start with anything wild, just some small-time hustles, like swiping boxes of Twinkies and selling them around the neighborhood for pocket change. But in the projects, even the smallest hustle grows teeth. You either level up or get swallowed whole. Then came the late 80s, when crack hit Atlanta like a storm nobody saw coming. Streets that once buzzed with kids playing turned into danger zones overnight. By 1988, Cedric was 16 and knee-deep in the street life. Around Techwood, everyone knew his name. He moved fast, made money faster, and lived even faster. He once said he had around $26,000 stashed away. Real money for a teenager back then. He spent big on his girl, dressing fly, and living like he owned the block. But every dollar had a dark shadow behind it. Cedric wasn't just hustling. He was enforcing respect. And respect in those streets wasn't something you asked for. It was something you took. Anyone who crossed him got a taste of why people said his name with caution. Two major moments from that era locked in his street legend. The first was about a man known locally as Big Bird. One rainy night in Atlanta, after some heated tension between them, Cedric spotted Big Bird sitting in his 5.0 Mustang. He didn't think twice. He came charging out with two guns, a .38 and another pistol, letting shots off into the night.
He used to beat my mama like that. Like, he beat my mama. He stomped my mama. He stomped my mama teeth out. That trauma like that really f***ed me up. It was like I got f***ed up at a young age.
But the rain turned the ground slick. Cedric slipped, hit the mud face first, still trying to scramble up while shots cracked through the storm. Big Bird leaned over the hood of his car and fired back with a .45, gunfire echoing through the wet streets, thunder mixing with the chaos. The sound of those shots echoed through Techwood like thunder. Zellers managed to pull back just in time, grabbed another gun from his cousin Lonzo, and went right back into the chaos, chasing Big Bird straight into an apartment building. It was wild, reckless, and loud enough for everyone to know this wasn't some kid playing tough. This was someone who didn't seem to care if he made it out alive. But what came next hit even closer to home. The second incident wasn't about territory, it was personal. An older guy in the neighborhood, one of the local OGs, had publicly disrespected Zellers' girlfriend Keisha during a dispute over drugs. And in that world, public disrespect was a death sentence for your reputation. Let it slide and your name was done. Nobody would take you seriously again.
Or to really be associated with that. Right. that ain't in my best interest. Right. Well, if that's the take on it, I have no choice but to separate myself, you know, just due to what's best for me and mine.
So Zellers handled it the only way he knew how, with violence. He tracked the man down and opened fire 5 times. The bullets tore through both of the man's legs, his lower body, and his pride. According to Zellers himself, he then walked right up, aimed the gun at the man's head, and pulled the trigger 3 times. But the gun jammed. A split-second malfunction, a mechanical failure that literally saved that man's life. Later that same night, back at his mother's house, Zellers fired the same gun into the air, and it worked perfectly. That realization hit him like a punch to the gut. He had really meant to end someone's life over a moment of disrespect. The early 90s became a blur, a revolving door of streets, jail, streets again. Zellers caught time for a cocaine charge, came home, and went right back to the only life he knew.
I can't let this dude disrespect my girl, and you disrespect my name. You doing it loud in front of everybody. I go down there, and I pop him, and I pop him 5 times. You know, I popped him in both his legs, put the gun to his head, pulled the trigger 3 times, and then I offered my first record deal 2 weeks out of prison. Beanie Siegel offered me my first record deal in his mother's living room.
But in 1995, the game flipped for real. He got caught selling guns to an undercover federal agent. That single move changed everything. By the time this went down, Cedric Zellers was already deep in the system, a convicted felon with a robbery charge hanging over him. And when it comes to federal gun cases, there's no mercy. Those sentences hit hard. You serve at least 85% of your time. No early break, no easy deals. The numbers were cold and heavy. About 110 months, just over 9 long years. At only 23 years old, Zellers was staring down the loss of his entire youth. He was shipped off to federal prison. And this time, the weight of it all hit different. Doing time in silence wasn't cutting it anymore. He wanted a way out. Somewhere deep down, he started looking for a move that could change everything. According to official records from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia, in October 1995, Zellers made that move. He agreed to cooperate. He sat down with federal agents, got debriefed, and started giving up information on criminal activity in Atlanta. But this wasn't about some small-time street player. The main focus was a man named Ali Bakar, accused of being a major supplier. This was big, not your usual corner-level case. The feds needed someone who had real credibility, someone from the inside who could connect the dots the way no outsider could, and Zellers fit that role perfectly. He didn't just whisper in the dark either. He met face-to-face with DEA agents and a federal prosecutor, helping them build the case piece by piece. Under his legal name, Cedric Zellers, later known to the world as Alpha Omega, he became a government witness in United States versus Ali Bakar. His testimony hit hard in court, and when the verdict came down, Bakar was convicted of conspiracy to distribute. Zellers' words carried real weight in that federal courtroom. In the federal system, substantial assistance is the only real ticket out from under those brutal mandatory sentences, and Cedric Zellers used it to get his shot at freedom. In July 1997, the government came through on their end. Judge J. Owen Forrester approved a sentence reduction. Zellers had earned it by cooperating. He got 18 months shaved off his time, cutting his sentence from 110 months to 92. A year and a half of freedom, traded for information forever sealed in those federal court files. Most of his time was served out in USP Lompoc, California, far away from Atlanta, far away from Techwood. Being cut off from everything he knew started to change him. The name Techwood said began to fade, and something new began to rise in its place. Locked up behind bars, he wrote like a man possessed. Songs, scripts, books, pages stacked into the thousands. He was crafting a new identity, one built from pain and ambition. In his head, the past was buried. He was no longer the street hustler, he was an artist reborn, ready to flip his story into something powerful. But deep down, he didn't realize the world outside had moved on without him. When Cedric Zellers finally walked out of that federal prison gate in February 2002, the world waiting for him didn't look anything like the one he'd left behind. The internet had taken over. Hip-hop had entered the bling era, and Southern rap, once fighting for its place, was now running the charts. Zellers had missed all of it, every trend, every sound, every come-up. But his time inside USP Lompoc, what he called Gladiator School, hadn't gone to waste. He'd rebuilt himself from the ground up. He wasn't just lifting weights or surviving the politics of the yard, he was writing nonstop. By his own count, he came home with over 1,700 songs, 3 screenplays, and a non-fiction book locked in his mind. Prison had stripped away his freedom, but it handed him something priceless: focus. He turned his trauma into fuel for creativity, convinced he was finally ready to live a second life, even if the outside world hadn't seen his face in 7 long years. Most people think Alpha Omega's story picks right back up in Atlanta with T.I. the moment he got out, but that's not the full truth. There's a whole missing chapter that usually gets skipped over. When Cedric Zellers walked free, he didn't head straight home to Bankhead. His first stop, Philadelphia, and the first major cosign he ever got wasn't from the King of the South. It came from the Broad Street bully himself, Beanie Siegel. That's right, Alpha Omega found himself sitting in Beanie Siegel's mother's living room in Philly, right in the middle of the Rockefeller glory days, when Beanie's name held serious weight in the streets and the studio. This wasn't the polished, PR-trained side of the rap world. This was the real, gritty heart of it. Beanie had a sharp nose for fakes and frauds, and he prided himself on calling them out fast.
Alpha wasn't always Alpha. Alpha was Sid first. You know what I mean? 2 different people.
If you ain't know him right now, he probably robbed y'all for this camera shit and all that. Like, for real, I'm dead ass serious.
Shit, man. You done shot nigga, man.
Right there in that living room, Zellers started rapping for Beanie, his mother, and his sister. No mic, no stage, just raw talent and conviction. Beanie listened close and saw something different: the hunger, the authenticity, and that unmistakable prison-hardened energy that came from surviving real battles. Standing 6'4", Alpha Omega didn't come off as desperate or fan-crazed. He came off like a man who knew his worth. According to Alpha Omega, Beanie Siegel was so impressed that he offered him a deal on the spot. But then Zellers did something that still makes people scratch their heads. He turned it down. He looked Beanie dead in the eye and said, "I'm a boss like you. I just wanted you to hear me." He wasn't out there begging for a handout or chasing a shortcut. He was demanding respect, not rescue. And to make it crystal clear, he meant business. He even paid Beanie for his time. That moment in Philly proved Alpha Omega wasn't just another broke rapper, fresh out of prison, begging for a lifeline. Turning down Beanie Siegel's deal showed confidence, the kind that money can't fake. That single interaction gave him a quiet but powerful stamp of respect. And in those days, if Beanie Siegel co-signed you, the streets listened. No questions asked. By 2005, Alpha Omega was back in Atlanta, and the city was on absolute fire. The South was running hip-hop, and right at the center of it all was T.I., transforming from a respected street figure into a global superstar. But that kind of glow-up came with its own problem. When you're climbing that high, you can't afford to look too street anymore. T.I. needed someone to carry that raw energy for him, someone who could remind people that the king still had fire behind the crown. That's exactly where Alpha Omega came in. Their connection wasn't random either. Alpha already knew T.I.'s father, known in the streets as Daddy, and even his uncle. There was real trust, real history, and a mutual understanding of how both the streets and the business worked. When Alpha Omega officially joined the Grand Hustle Circle, it wasn't through contracts or deals. It was a handshake built on street code. T.I. was the king, and Alpha Omega became the muscle, the one who didn't have to talk much because his presence said everything. For the next few years, he played that position perfectly, standing tall, always in the background, calm, but ready to act when things got real. He was the grand hustle muscle, the kind of figure who brought actual street credibility into an industry full of people pretending to live what they rapped about. And when things needed to be handled, Alpha didn't just talk, he handled them. That dynamic hit its peak in 2007 with the release of the record Hurt, featuring Alpha Omega and Busta Rhymes. The track was pure, unfiltered aggression, lyrics full of home invasions, retaliation, and burying enemies. It was raw, menacing, and unforgettable. The kind of song that made people believe every word. The Hurt video shoot went down as legendary in Atlanta. This wasn't some polished set packed with hired extras. This was the real street stepping into the spotlight. People pulled up from everywhere. Former NFL players, well-known street figures, and heavy hitters from Alabama and Texas, all coming through just to stand behind Alpha Omega. The vibe was raw, tense, and unpredictable. It felt less like a video shoot and more like a gathering of power. You could feel the danger in the air. In the middle of that chaos, T.I. pulled a move nobody expected. Out of nowhere, he tossed Alpha Omega a set of keys and said, "It's yours." The crowd froze. The moment was heavy with meaning. That wasn't just a gift. It was a symbol of loyalty. In that instant, Alpha's position looked locked in. Loyalty earned, respect rewarded. But the irony cut deep, even if nobody realized it at the time. Because while T.I. was out front leading a public stop snitching campaign, preaching silence, loyalty, and street code, The man standing behind him, holding those keys, had once cooperated with the feds years earlier to reduce his own sentence. The same streets that celebrated him now had no clue about the paperwork sitting quietly in a federal court archive. The image was perfect, but the truth underneath it told another story. To really understand the height of Alpha Omega's enforcer era, you gotta look at November 24th, 2008, the night of the Dirty Awards in Atlanta. The city was already buzzing with tension. Things had been boiling for months between Grand Hustle and Shawty Lowe's D4L crew. This wasn't some harmless rap beef or media stunt. This was about territory. Bankhead wasn't just a neighborhood, it was a claim, a crown, and both sides wanted it. I said it was his turf. Shawty Lowe said he lived it every day. By the time everyone showed up that night, the hostility in the room was so thick you could almost slice it. The streets of Atlanta were watching and waiting to see who would flinch first. When Shawty Lowe hit the stage to perform They Know, the crowd went wild. But to Grand Hustle, that song felt like a direct shot at TV. And for someone like Alpha Omega, who lived by loyalty and pride, that wasn't just music, that was provocation. According to witnesses and police reports, the tension exploded fast. Mid-performance, the Grand Hustle section started rumbling, shouts flying back and forth. And then it happened. Alpha Omega grabbed a chair and launched it straight toward the stage. That single move detonated the room. Chaos erupted instantly. Artists rushed forward. Fists started flying. Bottles smashed in every direction. Security couldn't keep up, and things spun out so fast that police had to deploy pepper spray inside the venue just to break it all apart. When T.I. finally took the stage later to accept an award, he tried to calm the madness down, calling for peace, urging everyone to chill. But it was too late. The show had already collapsed into pure mayhem. The night ended early, and Alpha Omega was left pepper sprayed, cuffed, and dragged out in handcuffs while flashing lights and shouts filled the air. Years later, that wild night took on an almost tragic twist. Alpha Omega revealed that the man he'd clashed with, the one everyone thought was his enemy, actually wasn't an enemy at all. Turns out, one of his children's mothers was Shawty Lowe's sister. They were basically family without even realizing how close the connection ran that night. Looking back, Alpha Omega called the whole thing a massive misunderstanding, a moment fueled by pride, adrenaline, and a refusal to back down. He later apologized, saying he'd only acted in self-defense, thinking Shawty Lowe was about to throw a drink at him, but by then it didn't matter. The damage was already done, and that night became another legend in Atlanta's wild hip-hop history. The image that burned itself into everyone's memory was that chair flying through the air, frozen in time like a symbol of chaos. That single moment defined Alpha Omega's entire run as the Grand Hustle Muscle. By the end of 2008, he was seen as untouchable. He was the guy who'd go all in for the crew, the one willing to take on a whole squad solo if that's what it took. The streets respected him, and the industry was starting to pay attention. His debut album, I Am Alpha Omega, was lined up to drop in early 2009. It looked like he was finally turning that street reputation into a real rap career. Everything was lining up perfectly, or so he thought, because while Alpha Omega was making noise in Atlanta, a journalist at the Smoking Gun was quietly pulling on a thread that was about to unravel everything. Behind the scenes, they were digging through old federal case files from the Northern District of Georgia, and what they found was something no amount of muscle, loyalty, or street clout could protect him from. What was about to surface would flip his image upside down. Snitch allegations and exile from Grand Hustle.
I turned him down. I told him, no disrespect, I'm a boss like you. I just want to make sure you feel me. I'm going to pay you $5,000 for wasting your time. Boom. And I did. Like, man, you liked it. You know what I'm saying? So my point's been proven. My point got proven.
On May 5th, 2009, the Smoking Gun dropped the bomb. They uploaded a PDF with a headline that read, "Rap star's protege once worked as DEA informant, government witness." Inside that document were official court records from 1995, receipts straight from the U.S. District Court for the Northern District of Georgia. It showed that back when Cedric Zellers was facing a possible 110-month federal sentence for selling guns to an undercover agent, he'd made a fateful choice. According to those files, Zellers agreed to cooperate with federal authorities and was formally debriefed about the drug activity of a man named Ali Bakar, the same case that had helped him shave time off his sentence years earlier. The paperwork even included the official record of that deal. On July 25, 1997, Judge J. Owen Forrester signed an order approving a sentence reduction for substantial assistance. That 18-month sentence reduction, dropping his time from 110 months to 92, was the exact proof the internet needed to believe the worst. And the timing? It couldn't have hit T.I. at a worse moment. Just days later, the King of the South himself was getting ready to report to federal prison for his own 2007 machine gun case, the one that exploded after his bodyguard, Corey Williams, secretly wore a wire for the feds. I was already in the fight of his career, doing everything he could to distance himself from any talk of cooperation or snitching. And now, the man who stood right behind him as the Grand Hustle Muscle had his name attached to federal paperwork. The optics were brutal and the streets were watching every move. I didn't waste a second. He called into Atlanta's Hot 107.9, jumping straight into damage control mode. On air, he sounded calm but firm, said he was stunned and totally surprised by the news about Alpha Omega. He emphasized that everyone in his circle was expected to keep it real about their past. No secrets, no surprises. Then he made it clear. Alpha Omega had never told him or Grand Hustle about any of this. And then came the kill shot. T.I. stated he essentially deceived us by failing to fully disclose the truth about his past. He went on to add that there was no place in our organization for dishonest or misleading behavior. That was it. Clean, cold, and final. Ty wrapped it up by wishing Alpha Omega well financially, but he also made sure everyone knew Grand Hustle would play no role in his future. Just like that, it was over. Alpha Omega was out, but the fallout didn't stop with business ties being cut. Not long after the story broke and T.I. made his public statement, rumors started flying that Alpha Omega had been hospitalized. Whispers spread fast. The streets said he'd been jumped. Others claimed he'd been set up. Nobody knew what to believe. Then, out of nowhere, Alpha Omega confirmed the truth himself, not in an interview, but in a diss track. And with that, the quiet betrayal turned into open war on wax. Not long after the fallout, Alpha Omega revealed the shocking truth. He had broken both of his legs. Then, in March 2010, he came back swinging with a track called Green Light, a direct shot aimed straight at T.I. On the record, he rapped, "I broke both legs, so I had to fall back, regroup, reset, and then crawl back." The message was clear. He wasn't done yet. In the song, Alpha Omega called T.I. out hard, accusing him of abandoning the very man who had stood by him when things got rough. He reminded listeners of the role he played in the crew, calling himself the muscle who protected him. And then he dropped a line that stunned everyone, claiming that when T.Y.'s own legal problems started, he was calling me in tears. Whether it was true or not, that line hit like a slap across the industry's face. But Alpha didn't stop at music. He took his story straight to the cameras. In multiple interviews, especially his sit-down with DJ Vlad, he tried to flip the whole narrative. He denied ever being a DEA informant, insisting that his case was about an ATF gun charge, not drugs. He brushed past the fact that federal agencies often work together, focusing instead on the technicality, trying to clean up his name in the eyes of the streets. Then came his most controversial defense, the one that had people arguing for years. Alpha Omega said he didn't snitch, he lied. According to him, he didn't even personally know Ali Bakar, the man from the original case. He claimed the feds fed him all the details, names, vehicles, addresses, and he just repeated them back to secure that sentence reduction. In his mind, since Bakar was a stranger, what he did didn't break the street code because, as Alpha put it, you can't betray someone you never knew. It was a wild explanation, part defense, part justification, but one that kept the controversy alive and his name still echoing through the rap world. He swore he hadn't betrayed anyone he actually knew, but the streets didn't buy it. That kind of technical talk doesn't stand a chance in a world that runs on simple rules. Loyalty is loyalty, period. Once your name gets tied to paperwork, the streets decide your fate, and no explanation can erase it. Years later, the scandal that ended Alpha Omega's rap career feels like a lifetime ago, but Cedric Zellers himself, he never vanished. He didn't fade into silence or disappear into regret. He pivoted. These days, you'll find him showing up as a true OG, a street historian, and a commentator who's lived everything he talks about. On YouTube and interview platforms, he sits back and speaks with that same raw confidence, breaking down life in Techwood homes, the Red Dog Police era, surviving federal time, and exposing the dark side of the music game. And he's not afraid to open up about his own chaos either. He's shared that he's the father of 24 children with over 20 mothers, saying it with the kind of honesty that only comes from experience. He talks about the industry like it's a machine built to break people, draining them with alcohol, ego, exhaustion, and temptation. But over time, Alpha Omega has shown a softer, more human side too. Recently, he's used his platform to search for a missing nephew, publicly pleading for information and connection, showing the world that behind the tough talk and the muscle, there's a man who's been through real pain. The old enforcer image has faded away, replaced by something more grounded, more reflective. Still, Zeller stands firm on one thing. He believes he was sacrificed to protect TY's image when everything fell apart. In his eyes, he was just a convenient casualty, the one the king had to cut off to survive his own storm. He sums it up with a line that still carries weight. Real recognizes real. He says those who truly know him know his heart, no matter what the paperwork says. If you made it this far, make sure to like, subscribe, and drop a comment below. Let me know your thoughts on Alpha Omega's story. And as always, share this with someone who loves hip-hop history. See you in the next one.